On this episode of Bleak, I will be covering the senseless murder of Barway Collins, and Laura will be covering The Boy in the Box. Buckle your seatbelts. There's no light at the end of this tunnel. It's about to get
there sure isn't.
bleak.
So how's it going, Amanda?
You know, we've been away for a minute.
Yeah.
So sorry about that.
Life is crazy. Life is crazy.
Yes. Just
The children keep us on our toes. There's always so much going on.
yes.
But this is definitely one of my true passions next to genealogy for me.
Yeah,
Genealogy,
I'm
true
number
crime.
one true crime.
I know, I'm number
Isn't
2 true crime.
But you know
they're
what?
both pretty great.
Genealogy kind of lumps into true crime because of all the
It does.
genealogy they're doing to solve cold cases.
It does, and in this case, that is exactly what happened.
Yes, I love a cold case solved by genetic genealogy.
Yes.
You know what my favorite thing is?
What?
Is when they get the family tree, they break
Yep.
it down, they're like, it's one of these 3 dudes, right?
Right.
It's usually a dude, let's be honest.
Yes.
And they have to like follow them and get their trash.
I
and
know.
stuff. I love that.
I know. Isn't that
It's
great?
like, and then of course,
if you were not the perpetrator, though, wouldn't you find it weird if suddenly, like, it feels like you're being followed and, like, there's
unless
cars
they're
all
really
around.
like inconspicuous about it, like
Yeah,
they really
like, you're not the perpetrator, but
your
suddenly-
brother is.
But your brother is. That's
Right.
awful.
Because that's what the situation
Right.
would be.
Right. I mean, I'd be happy to lend my DNA if they thought my brother was the
some terrible
serial
killer.
or whatever. Yeah.
A lot of these times, like, these guys are like living normal lives, and
Yeah.
some of them never committed another crime that they at least got caught for.
Right. I think they probably thought they were lucky to have gotten away with it,
Yeah.
and now
You got to imagine there are people shaking in their boots, though, knowing that
their case is gonna come up eventually.
yeah, they
Yeah.
probably are people that are quite scared. One other
Right.
thing I wanted to talk about quick before we start.
And they should be.
How about those Idaho murders of the 4 college students?
Oh my gosh!
Isn't that just
That's
nuts?
insane.
It's bananas.
It is a
It's-
real life.
That is like, and it's so scary
It
because
is.
it just seems odd to me. Like, if it was targeted, why would they happen to have issues with all 4 of those people?
Right.
'Cause-
they
And they
there's no
didn't.
reason
And
for it.
two of them hung out together that night, like we're at a party or something.
Yeah.
And then the other 2 did. So if like the whole idea of somebody following them home,
Right.
that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, why
No.
would they kill the other 2?
Right. It doesn't. The entire thing is very mystifying. So it'll be interesting to see what's uncovered.
Good thing the FBI is working with them too, because
Yeah.
the very next day, the Idaho Police Department, it's called it's Moscow, but they call it Moscow, I
Oh,
think.
Interesting.
It's spelled like Moscow, Russia, but I guess they pronounce it Moscow. But they
Oh.
came out like the next day and they're like saying they cleared the other roommates that were
Oh.
home, and it's like,
But how
you
could
can't.
clear
And then
them
they
that
kind of
quickly?
like backtracked, saying like,
I don't
"Oh,
think
there's no threat to the public," and then the next day they're like, "Well, there is a threat to the
could be a
public."
threat to the public.
It's like,
4. I
really,
mean, that's
guys?
a lot
That's-
of people.
yeah.
I mean, to say there's no threat to the public. I mean,
To me, there's a lot of threat to the public.
Right.
Somebody, and I do think it's odd that 2 roommates were completely untouched.
right.
You know,
right. Doesn't
that's-
that you can't clear them that quickly?
Yeah, exactly.
You
can't.
You can't.
So anyhow, I just wanted to.
Not unless they were like out of the state or something, but they weren't.
No, they were there. They know
were there.
that.
Yeah.
They know that for a
Right.
fact.
Right.
So,
So what
anyhow,
happened?
well, and then I guess too, not sorry to go on about this, but the 911 call, it was one of the roommates. First he called someone else and he said, Billy Bob is unconscious. would you not see like all the? It was
The other-
horrible stabbing, right?
Right.
They're all stabbed horrifically. You think they're just passed out?
Right.
That
There's
is
blood
not-
all over.
That
Oh,
is
it's
not
passed out.
normal.
No, it
That
isn't.
there's something weird about that.
Yeah.
So
So it will be very interesting to see what they uncover as time goes on. However, I will say people do react in such different ways.
no, and I agree.
It's
You
like
can't-
their mind doesn't want to believe what they're seeing.
Well, right. Kind of
You know
like
what I
in the
mean?
Betsy Freya case when he's like, my
Right.
wife committed suicide.
Right.
I actually watched another case. It was the exact same thing where
Yeah.
the police got super suspicious because it was a guy, like an 18-year-old that discovered his mom dead in the bathtub.
Right.
And he immediately was like, oh my gosh, my mom killed herself. And they were like, the police made it in this huge thing and suspected him because of him thinking
Right.
that.
It's like if you report the wrong thing, but how do you know? You're just walking in on this traumatic situation.
Yeah.
So it
So
could have
if
been
you're a
something
police
along
officer
those lines.
and you work homicide, don't be suspicious because of that just in
No.
and of itself.
No, that's ridiculous.
That's my public service announcement.
I'm not, I might not be an expert in, manners of death.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I might think, oh my gosh, bloody nose. Like Bob always had bloody noses.
Well, and then the case
whatever.
I was watching, her hands had been bound, but he didn't see it right away.
Oh.
He didn't see her hands.
Right.
And then later in the call, he goes, "Oh my gosh, I think she was actually murdered."
Right.
But they still, oh well, how could he have gone in there and think his mom killed herself? I'm just like, what
Well,
is with you guys in this?
Right.
Anyhow,
They're judging on these immediate reactions to things when if I walk, who knows what I'll think happened to them. Don't even ask me what happened to him. Just come.
yeah.
Like,
Well-
Bob is dead. Okay, come.
Well, I suppose they want to know. They need information, though, like if the police are going to be in danger when they arrive.
I suppose, yeah, like
and stuff
they're,
like that.
but yeah, I mean, no, there's no, I'm the only one here. Something is wrong. Come.
Yeah.
Like, who cares how it happened? We don't know that yet. We have no way to know that yet.
All right. Okay. So anyhow, Laura's going to start this week. And
Yeah.
she's going to be doing the Boy in the Box. I should know more about this case, but I
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah,
At
so
all.
this case has been widely publicized. I've as a lot of people, I've heard about this for years and years here and there, and it's been on many podcast programs. It's also there have been books about it as well. So the gist of what happened here is that back on February 25th, 1957, a boy was found in Fox Chase or Chase Fox. Sorry, I'm not remembering the name of the town. So it was in Philadelphia. It was kind of like right in an area of Philadelphia. It's either Fox Chase or Chase Fox. I think it's Fox Chase. Anyways, and so a boy was found in a box in a wooded area. Now this box, interestingly enough, I've always found it interesting. It was a bassinet box. The boy, they concluded, was between 4 and 6 years old. He was severely malnourished, severely beaten. So extremely sad, just an incredibly
abused,
very
essentially.
abused. Yeah, very, very abused. But one thing they did notice is he had surgical scars. He had a surgical scar on his groin. He also had a surgical scar on his ankle, which indicate at some point he had
medical care.
To the point of having two
different
different surgeries.
Groin scars, because one of my kids had this, is very common for a child that had an inguinal hernia around the time of birth, which is
that's
common in
interesting.
premature babies especially.
Yeah.
And then they end up having Liam has 2 little marks on his
From that.
on either side.
Yeah.
So, yeah, anyhow, that could have been what it was.
Yeah. So
Sorry, there's like a weird person that pulled up to the house.
they were like waving or something, and I was like, "Hello."
Wouldn't that be weird if a crime got caught on a podcast?
Yes, it would. Yes, it would. We can sit here and explain detail for detail.
What's happening?
What's happening? But a crime was not caught on a podcast today. Thank goodness, because I don't want to do that today.
That could be a hit,
another day, maybe,
but then we would probably be dead and we wouldn't be able to release it.
Yeah, how would we release it? That would be
Anyhow.
really difficult to release if we were not alive. Let's see. So,
Maybe we could just barely survive.
Yeah, that happens. Let's just barely survive. No, I'd like to full on survive. Full
That's
on.
true. I don't want to be like have a major head trauma or anything.
No. Or be in a wheelchair, no thanks. Or be blind or something. So, okay, so this boy was found. He's got these surgical scars. Of course, the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. And they spent years just investigating this case. So it was and this was old timey stuff. Okay,
Well, sure, 1957.
Yeah.
That was the year. Wasn't that year our mom was born?
yes,
57,
it was.
yeah.
It was. Yeah.
So
Yep.
65-ish years ago.
Yep. So it was 65 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in order to make him, maybe recognizable to people, they like sat him up in a chair, and took pictures, and put him places.
That is bizarre, but I've
Yeah.
heard.
In the old days.
Okay,
it's, yeah.
have you heard about who Speedy is? Do you know who Speedy is?
No.
Okay, I have to go off on another tangent.
That's
I
okay.
apologize. Our
That's
cases
okay.
are kind of short this week, so we can do that.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I heard about this thing. I don't know if
Thing?
you really call it a case, but it was a guy named Speedy,
Yes.
and he there was somebody in the society. This is like a long time ago.
Oh, sure.
And he wanted to do an experiment or a test on preserving a body, right? He had
sure.
some new preservative,
Right.
not formaldehyde, but something similar.
Something else.
And so he wanted a body to test it out on, and this guy they called him Speedy.
Yes.
He ended up dying, right?
Right.
And he didn't have anybody. I guess he couldn't afford the burial type thing, and this was back in the day.
Right.
So this
like donate your body.
this
type of
guy
situation.
was like took it upon himself to like take Speedy's body or whatever.
Right.
And he preserved him
Oh.
in this whatever chemical to see how long, like how it would work.
Right.
And so there's this town where this girl was saying like part of her childhood is all the kids would go to like this person's house and Speedy would be there,
Jeez.
and like that was like one of their school field trips.
Can you imagine?
To go see this guy Speedy, and I'm listening to this, I'm like, this cannot be true. There's no way this is true.
Hey kids, your parents sign a permission slip for
Yeah.
your kids to go see that.
To go see Speedy, and it was like normal. And then the girl she'd submitted this story to
Like
to something, and the girl was like, "Yeah, I didn't realize how abnormal it was
At the
until
time.
she's like until I was at work like years later,
Right.
and I was telling a coworker about it, and the coworker was like, "You've got to be kidding me," and so you go online.
Yeah.
I'm gonna Google it here.
Yeah.
This poor man, and he's like they have him dressed up like in a tux.
Oh, my tux. Jeez. What do you even look up? Speedy dead body. Oh, okay.
There he is.
Oh my gosh. Is that today?
I mean, this is in he drowned in the Ohio River.
And that's sad enough.
His name is Speedy Atkins.
Oh.
And apparently...
Oh, he was finally buried in 94.
Yeah.
So when did he die?
66 years. So they did this for 66 years.
1928 he died and they buried him in 94?
And these people, the parents, or the children of the person that invented the preservative,
Right.
he was like left in as like something in their will to his
Ish.
children. And finally his children were like, we're not going to take him. We're going to go ahead and do the ethical thing
Right.
here.
Bury him.
So yeah, isn't that wild?
That is wild.
Yeah. So
In
anyway.
1949 as well, Velma took custody of Adkins' body. She kept it for another 45 years. Like, really?
Can you just imagine this is like
Custody.
in your house, and yeah, like kids would go to the house as a field trip and visit this
Jeez.
like stuffed body or whatever you want to say of this dude. Poor Speedy.
Oh, I know. Poor guy. And clearly it worked pretty good.
Well, he was fishing and fell in the Ohio River.
Wow. Oh.
Poor guy.
Poor guy.
He was only 53.
Oh.
So
I mean, he didn't look very good in the picture. So it just
that was his preserved dead body. How can you judge how well he looked based on that?
I'm just saying that I don't feel like it was like super preserved. Like, you know what I mean?
And
It
then
looked
my
like an
thought
alien,
is,
kind
did this?
of.
What is this preservative? Is
Right.
it something that you determine didn't work very well,
Is
or
it better than formaldehyde?
evidently not, because nothing I don't think came of it. But anyhow,
Interesting.
so
That
yeah,
is
if
interesting.
you want to look into that, it's Speedy is the gentleman's name.
Next time I'll have to interject next podcast maybe about an equally disturbing gentleman I found in my husband's tree by accident.
Oh dear. Oh
Yes.
man.
Enema. We'll just say the word enema, and then next time maybe I will. That's kind of a longer one, but there weren't any deaths, so I don't want to do it as a case particularly. It's
Sure.
a lot of cases, but anyways, the disturbing people you find in your family tree. We could have a whole episode on that.
You can't choose your family.
You cannot
just
choose your
can't.
family. I'll tell you that right. You cannot. Though I love my family, but I mean, there are members way out there that you're just like, wow. And stories. And so anyways, okay, so we've got the back to the boy in the box.
Yes, back to the case at hand.
Okay, so they find this boy in this bassinet box, severely bruised, beaten, very sad. So for 65 years they have been trying to find who killed this boy. They figured at first, if they got his picture out there and the details and everything, that maybe somebody would come forward. They thought, oh, this, someone eventually will come forward and we'll figure out who this is.
Mhm.
But nobody ever did.
Well, here's my thought on that too, is like, you have to imagine his parents might be involved. And if they
Right.
don't want anyone to know about it, they're probably going to go to great lengths to
Oh, yeah, there's his head.
cover it up.
Yeah.
She's showing me a picture.
Yeah. So,
Huh.
yeah. So, a couple things. So over the years, as time goes on, there's of course various theories that,
Sure.
about where this boy came from, who could have killed him. And so about a mile and a half-ish away from the, where the box was discovered, there was a foster home.
That's
And at
interesting.
one point, a renowned psychic, Remington Bristow, he led the police to this foster home. Well, it turned out they were able to, figure out based on records, etc., that everyone in the foster home was accounted for. There were like 8 children. They were all accounted for. So they were like, okay, not the foster home.
Ooh, that's a shocker that the psychic didn't get him to the right place.
No, in this case the psychic did not work out. So then many years later, this is in 2002.
Yeah, that's crazy.
This woman comes forward. It says her name is Martha. I do know her last name, but she's unidentified on a lot of the shows, so I won't reveal her last name just because I don't want. I don't know.
It's just not really
It's
pertinent.
not pertinent. Anyways, Martha comes forward and she says that her mother, way back in the day, so she's saying that in 1957-ish or somewhere in that, 1956, 57, her mother purchased the boy from parents who from his birth parents. Oh no, 1954. She said that her parents or her mother purchased this boy that was cognitively disabled, and that the mom abused him and killed him and forced her to assist in dumping the body. So that's one theory. The other thing is when the boy was discovered, there were clumps of hair on him, leading people to believe that his hair had been, which it must have been cut post-mortem. So some people thought perhaps he was raised as a girl, like by somebody who was mentally ill, or you know what I mean, like. But so anyways, that was one of the other theories, and there have been all kinds of theories over time that, and all kinds of very false, people coming forward, etc. Now, when the boy was identified this week, it turns out his name was Joseph August Zarelli. Augustus, yes, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. And when you look into this, you find out that the father, because they haven't released this yet, but was looking on, because I of course went on to Ancestry and found all the Zarellis in the area and went, okay, has to come from this family. So I go on to findagrave.com. And because I'm doing this in real time, so my bad. Here we go. So that's not on here anymore. They've taken it off. So anyways, he was linked
to a family
on there, and the father's name was Augustus. And they're saying hold judgment. And then there was a mother on there as well, who was somebody who had been married to this guy for many, many, many years. But when you look into it deeper, you find out that the marriage wasn't until a few years after this boy would have been born. So then it must be a case where perhaps it was a baby out of wedlock. So he's the father. They said it came from a prominent family, and this is not a prominent family. The Zarelli family, not a prominent family. So I'm wondering if the female must be the prominent family, the mother. Sure. And so they're saying what they said on here was to hold judgment until all the facts are in. So it's possible the dad didn't even know about him, or did know about him, but they decided to part ways or give him up.
Well, maybe the mom was cheating or something.
Right. Who knows? Who knows?
And that's so taboo back in the day, especially.
Well, out of wedlock was taboo back in the day. And he would have been quite young when he was born. So I'm thinking it was a teenager probably situation, out of wedlock type of situation. Perhaps something like that. And maybe an unwed mother's home, who knows. But the boy must have ended up in being adopted or something, and so it's those people who would then be responsible for it.
Wouldn't be the biological
parents.
It is interesting that it's been taken off of Ancestry, though.
Yeah, it was taken off of here.
Somebody didn't want it there.
No, it must maybe the fan. Who knows who it was? But it was linked before. So, here he is.
Huh.
But you see, they've taken off the boy in the box.
What is his relationship to him?
So here we go. It says, and the message on here is to please refrain from jumping to conclusion based on today's announcement on December 8th. Wait for the details to run their course. Please also refrain from adding flower, da-da-da-da-da. And I have no control, So they were saying... So everybody real quick in the genealogical community figured out who it was.
So they're saying this is his dad?
That's his father, yeah.
Huh.
And he died in 2014. And this is the woman that he married. And then these are the other kids. One of the interesting facts is the two that died as babies, one of them had like malformations and things, and the other died of prematurity. But so you wonder if maybe there was some kind of genetic deformation type situation going on, and maybe he had the cognitive impairments, and because of that. And so the other possibility is because the DNA that was found, could really be one of his siblings as well. And I think he has a sister too. Well, there's others. There's lots of others. So, I mean, it could have been one of his siblings. I guess we don't know that for sure yet. Nobody knows. I don't know how everybody figured out it was exactly him. The other thing was, one interesting fact is when the boy was found, he was found with a handkerchief that had the letter G on it. He went by Gus, but so did his dad. So that is another interesting fact. I mean, we don't know for sure that he didn't play a role, or that that they didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get the whole, let's wait till the facts come out, though.
Yeah, I do too. But it's interesting to speculate.
The fact that they had, 4 other kids that are alive and well,
right,
to me says, well, I mean, yes, there are cases where parents only abuse, 1 or 2 of their kids.
Right.
That does happen, where they, have, a scapegoat or a specific child that they target for whatever reason.
Right.
But it does seem a little strange that the siblings would be normal and not unless they were abused and we don't know it.
Right. Well, in the Reddit community, and who knows, what I mean.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Take it with a super grain of salt. They're saying that the siblings, and I don't know where they came across this information, said that they had no idea
of his existence.
Which leads back to it was probably an unwed parent type of situation back in the 50s. Wasn't popular.
Was he the firstborn child?
Yeah.
What was his
in the
birth order?
In the birth order, he would have been. Yeah, yep. Because if we look at this here,
that to me makes more sense in them maybe giving him up based on how old would the dad have been at the time of his birth?
That is him. He is linked on here. It's 19. They just changed him from the boy in the box
to his name.
To his name. So he would have been way before the other.
He was born in 1953.
Right.
And
There
they're-
were other kids
and
that are
then-
still alive, though, is the thing. But they are younger.
the siblings are younger,
The siblings are younger.
so he wasn't the firstborn.
He was the firstborn.
Oh yeah, they would be younger. I don't know what I'm thinking.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
I'm slow today.
So it'll be very interesting to see how this case plays out. I just found it really awesome that after 65 years, they were able to figure this out with genetic genealogy. And they said that they're still, of course, going to pursue this like an active case because they don't know yet. You know what I mean? They're investigating who this boy was living with at the time. Was it a family member? Was he adopted? Was he purchased? And some people think that's where that woman's story comes in. You know, she purchased this boy in 1954. You know, this Martha.
Oh, sure.
Even though she is mentally ill, she still did have a distinguished career. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So perhaps this Martha's story picks up there, where her mother really did kill him and make her help and da-di-da, you know. I mean, that could be where the story picks up with her after.
I mean, if the siblings are saying they never knew about it,
Mhm.
it's hard to believe that they had a baby. I mean, I guess if the siblings are all younger, then it's
They might
possible.
not
Anything's
know.
possible,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
But I do think waiting till it all comes out is a good
Oh,
idea
yeah.
before passing any judgment. I
Right,
mean,
and that's why I can't judge anything on the situation. I just think that it's very interesting how this might have all played out and that they were able to find the genetic connection after 65 years. And it was, and the gentleman, I was reading an article, the gentleman in the family is like I want to say a second cousin or what would have been one of his mom's first cousins, something like that, was contacted by a genetic genealogist who said, we're trying to solve this boy in the box case. And of course he has no idea who the
Right.
heck that is or what's going on. And of course he's like, yes, we will help with this. And then he talked to his mom, who's older, very delicately, like, this is the story.
Sure.
I mean, can you imagine if one of your kids walked up to you and said, we need your DNA for this reason? You know, like, but of course they did it. And then there was the genetic link was it made it easier to figure out who it was. So
Yeah.
it'll be interesting over time to see how this goes. So they just said, and this may just be a relative using a family given name and not the actual father, which could be true. It could be a different member of the family. So we don't know yet. We do know that it's probably from that family, but which could it have been? Maybe the father wasn't in the picture, and so it's one of the sisters. I mean, nobody. I guess they wouldn't know that at this time because everybody's deceased.
Yeah.
So-
They'll figure it out, though.
They will figure it out, but it'll be neat to see what
transpire.
transpires. Yeah. So.
Yeah,
Up
wow.
next, Colin Barway or Barway Collins. I keep saying his name
Oh,
backwards.
it's not a common name.
It isn't. It isn't.
All right, so I'm covering the case of the disappearance and the murder of Barway Collins. This is not a case that it did get attention back when it happened in 2015, but nobody has really covered this since that time.
No, I mean you don't see any.
There were no podcasts.
Shows.
I searched it trying to find when I was doing research because I like to listen to other podcasts and or watch documentaries and stuff to get, have multiple sources. And there was one podcast that was from several years back that kind of covered it, but it was more of like a local news type thing, and it was a lawyer who was just didn't really have, it wasn't very informative.
Right.
So pretty much all the information came from newspaper articles from
Yeah.
back in 2015.
Yeah.
But eventually I was able, to find more information. It was difficult though, finding information on his background.
Right.
And but I did find out, most of that. So Barway Collins, he was 10 years old at the time he was murdered. So this is a child murder, which is very horrible.
Always.
Not to state the obvious, but it's extremely sad. So Barway was born November 10th, 2004, and he was actually born in Liberia. Barway's mother was a woman named Louise, and according to Louise, her last name is Carlua. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but Louise Carlua says that she actually had Barway when she was only 15.
Okay.
And how it happened was a man named Pierre Collins was teaching her French.
Okay.
Pierre.
Okay. Yeah. Yes.
It's a very Frenchy
Say the
name.
R with a
Pierre. And Pierre was teaching her French, and he was 23.
Okay.
And she says, and there is a little language barrier, so because per her quote, she goes, he just started petting me. So my assumption is she meant like he was like all of a sudden just started like touching her head,
Right.
like stroking her hair,
Right.
and then she said he raped her essentially during one of their
Jeez.
lessons.
Oh.
And so this is, his birth story is traumatic from the beginning.
Right.
So she's 15. She says that Pierre wanted her to have an abortion, and she just wasn't.
No.
That's not something that she wanted to do.
Right.
And the mother actually said she named him Edwin when he was born.
Oh.
So I don't know if the father changed his name, but after that he's always gone by Barway.
Oh.
So
Interesting.
the mother, you'll see if you read up on the case, will sometimes call him Edwin, so it can get a little confusing. But
Right.
that was the name she gave him. I don't think, as a 15-year-old unwed girl that was sexually assaulted, I'm sure she didn't have a lot of say in anything.
No.
And
especially in Liberia. I mean, I
well,
don't
and
know
it's I looked up what the age of consent is in Liberia, and I
Yeah.
kind of went in with this notion that it was going to be something terrible, like it's going to be like 12 or something.
Right.
And actually, their age of consent is 18.
Oh, really?
And they don't even have a law if it's like they call it like Romeo and Juliet laws, like if say a kid is 19 and the other one's 17,
Right.
or something like that. We
Right.
have laws like that here to
Right.
prevent prosecution for those kind of relationships.
Right.
Liberia doesn't even have a law like that.
Oh.
Now, granted, culturally, and Liberian people are awesome, so I'm not
They
saying
are.
anything
Oh,
terrible
yeah,
about them, but
absolutely.
I do think culturally that in Liberia, and this was only 7 years ago,
Right.
but I don't know that cases like that were going to be being prosecuted.
Right.
I don't he clearly never got in trouble for
Right.
it.
For that.
And a 15-year-old cannot consent,
Right.
so he, regardless of even if he were to lie and say it was consensual, she
Right.
legally cannot consent.
Right.
So either way, I mean that's a sad situation.
Yeah.
But regardless, she had Barway and she loved him. But Liberia, I don't know the specifics of all the issues Liberia has had, but I know they had a civil war at one point,
Yeah.
and a lot of people fled Liberia to Minnesota in particular. Minnesota is actually has a very high number of Liberian immigrants,
Right.
and I've worked with many actually.
Yeah, I have as well.
I
Yeah.
actually worked with a guy whose son was killed over there.
Oh.
So the reason that Barway and Pierre ended up coming to the United States was because of how bad it was in Liberia. Because I'm sure people are thinking, well, why would she let him go to
Right.
America with bad guy.
Right.
But she was kind of picking between two bad situations.
Right.
If she left him there, he might get killed given what's going on over there.
Right.
So
she said, okay.
she wanted him. There's this perception of America that he could live the American dream, and
right, and and he could have.
He could have. That's true.
I mean,
it wasn't going so well up until the point that he was killed. But
right.
So, Barway ended up coming to America with his father as a young boy. I don't know exactly when.
And Mom stayed. Why
and
did
Mom stayed? I don't think. Well, they weren't together. Number one.
Oh.
And I just don't think they were. She was able to for various reasons.
Like didn't have a passport, whatever the thing was.
There were, yeah. It wasn't because she didn't want to. I think she just wasn't able to.
Right.
So, in terms of Pierre Collins, there is information out there that he was married at least one time, after he came to the United States.
Oh, sure.
To a woman named Jennifer Beaver.
Okay.
And this Jennifer Beaver said after they divorced, she actually wanted Barway to live with her, and she actually petitioned the court for custody of him.
Right.
Because she always kind of got the impression that Pierre just was, bothered by him.
Right.
He just saw him as kind of a nuisance.
Yeah.
And, but for whatever reason, Pierre would not allow that to happen.
Oh.
So he was living with his dad. And then at the time of the disappearance and murder, Pierre was married.
Oh.
So Barway did have a stepmother. And she, I believe, had a couple of young children that lived in they actually lived in an apartment.
Okay.
So that's kind of the family dynamics that were in place at the time.
Right.
So I'm going to jump to the day that, this kind of started. So on March 24th, 2015, the police get a call from Pierre Collins at 6:37 p.m. saying that Barway never came home from school.
Oh.
And first of all, I think the police right off the bat were a little suspicious because he's 10 years old. And
right.
If the school bus, came at 2:30 or 3 o'clock, waiting 3.5 hours seemed like a really long time.
Yeah, that's a long
so
time.
right off the bat, because, we're talking about a child here.
Right.
So I feel like if my kid never got off the school bus, I maybe would have made some calls to make sure he didn't go to a friend's house.
Right.
But beyond that, I feel like that's suspicious.
It's a long time.
It's a long time. And, so anyhow, regardless, that's what happened. He called at that time. And so the police immediately, at this point he's a missing person or missing child.
Right.
So the police, of course, the first thing they do is they check with the school to make sure he attended school that day. And he had. Right. And then they check the, so apparently he rode home on a school van, they called it.
Oh, okay.
And at one point, they called him a vulnerable child. I don't, children are innately vulnerable, right?
Right.
So I don't know if they're just saying because he was a child he was vulnerable, or if he had extra issues or disabilities that made him, more vulnerable than an average child.
Right.
But he did, he was dropped off in this van, they called it, a school van.
So he might have had a special transportation.
Yeah. And the, not that it's really that relevant, but I think maybe whomever did this wasn't planning on that maybe having surveillance, because it did have surveillance.
Yeah.
So they check with the driver, and the driver says yes, he was on the bus or in the van. And the surveillance, there was surveillance in the van, and it actually had audio as well, which is unusual.
Yeah,
Usually it doesn't.
Yeah.
So one thing to note is as they were pulling up to the apartment building where Barway lived, you can hear him saying, "Oh, look, there's my dad." And as if, so clearly that implies he saw his dad,
Right.
whether he was standing there, whether he was in a vehicle, that's not clear. And then he says, "Oh, and my uncle's here too."
Oh.
Now, I don't know if Pierre Collins has a brother that lives nearby or even one that lives in America. But it is like apparently Liberians tend to use the term uncle to describe many different relationships.
So loosely.
Very loosely, like, yeah, your dad's friend you might call uncle.
Right.
So people were just saying, you can't assume he's talking about his father's brother.
Right.
Whereas I'm not, the only person I'm calling uncle are my uncles.
Right.
So that's a different, just a cultural thing.
Right.
So after they determined that he was on, the transport van, their thought, or, he had arrived back to his apartment at least, of course they're thinking, well, it makes them suspicious of his dad unless he was, like, abducted immediately from the residence before he even got inside.
So they knew the dad saw him when he got home.
Right, and the dad is at that point he's denying that. He's saying that he never, he didn't see him.
But he didn't count on that surveillance.
Right, and I don't think he knew, he's saying that before they got that, they checked the surveillance. So he is just, he's just a missing child at this point, and they do, they're focusing on the dad because he's just making inconsistent statements, and he did fail a polygraph.
Oh, okay.
So they polygraphed him and he failed, and he's still denying doing anything at that point and saying that he failed the polygraph because he was nervous, which is possible.
It's possible.
Not likely,
Not
but possible.
Likely. I mean,
and then, so the big thing with this case is the cell phone records from March 24th, the day this happened.
Right.
The dad, Pierre Collins, he says that he never left his residence on March 24th.
Right.
But cell phone records were pinging off an area near the Mississippi River in Brooklyn Park.
Oh.
By the way, this Pierre Collins and Barway and his family were living in an apartment in Crystal, Minnesota, and that is a suburb of Minneapolis, essentially.
Yeah.
And so there's this discrepancy because he's saying, I never left my house, and they're saying, well, your cell phone is putting you by the Mississippi River.
Right.
And Pierre Collins was basically just like, well, I don't know why that would be. He just had no
and
explanation.
Being by the Mississippi too, that's really, for the it's not good.
No, it's not at all. But this gave them somewhere to start.
Right.
Because they're like, well, unfortunately, he could have used the river as, for something terrible.
Right.
So that's where they started. They started searching the riverbanks and the surrounding areas. There were hundreds of volunteers. I remember when this happened. The dad was on Nancy Grace, and she was doing her interrogation as she does, and
right.
he, was denying, and they start going through, they had already done like the location analysis on the phone, right. And then now they're checking through like his calls and his text messages. Now, mind you, a lot of this stuff takes time. They don't get phone analysis done in a day. It takes days to have someone actually like investigate it all and
right.
figure out what's important and what's not.
Right.
And something that they found to be extremely interesting is 2 days before Barway disappeared, Pierre placed a call to a life insurance company, verifying that he had coverage on his children, and then also requesting to increase Barway's policy from a $30,000 policy to a $50,000 policy, and he actually made a payment on the plan, or on, for the life insurance.
Not suspicious at all.
Well, another question I have is it common to have life insurance on your children?
Well, I do have a small policy, I believe, through my employer where it's like $5,000, and it's in the event that the unthinkable were to happen, so that we could pay for a funeral. And I think that's
Sure.
the only amount we would have. I mean, it's nothing where,
I've just
nothing-
never heard
it's
of
not
somebody.
like thousands upon thousands of dollars.
Right, because you shouldn't go through your life thinking your kids are gonna die before you.
No,
So-
exactly. It's just something my work does. It's a
No,
benefit.
this is like an intentional policy that he's taken out.
Yeah, no.
Um,
I think people do that, but I don't.
I've not. I
don't
don't think it's a common thing, but
No,
we could be
no.
wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I haven't
So-
asked people.
After they find out about that phone call to the life insurance company, the police are like really suspicious. They have no reason, they have no indication that anybody else is involved, other than, they're trying to figure out who this uncle person is, because
Right.
they've never been able to find out who he was referring
Who was
to.
with the dad?
Right,
Someone
because
was with the dad. But who was it?
yeah, they don't know, even to this day, that they don't know.
So someone else might have
Been involved.
Right.
It's very possible.
So sad.
So weeks go by, they're not finding anything. Finally, on April 11th, so this is about 4 weeks after he disappeared, a group of Boy Scouts who were participating in the search. Now, I thought this was a little weird. Like, your kids in the Boy Scouts and they're going searching for dead bodies?
I didn't know that was one of their activities, but is this like a badge? Do you get a badge? If you discover
No.
it, do you get the badge? I mean, that's a little strange.
Yeah, I was like, and I read that in multiple places. So he was found. Unfortunately, his body was found by a group of Boy Scouts who were participating in the search for him.
Oh. Well, I do say they're short on volunteers. Maybe.
You think that'd be really traumatizing for one thing.
If my son was in the Boy Scouts and they said we're gonna do this, I would have to think about it.
I guess I'd ask my child, like, do you want to
Do you wanna
participate
do
in
this?
this? Do you realize what you might find?
Right. Like, you'd have to have a really heavy discussion before actually allowing them to do
And they
this.
found him in the Mississippi River,
Oh.
which, that's
Right.
kind of where all fingers were pointing at that point. Now, I had read that they believe he was initially placed in like a storm sewer, and that he somehow ended up where he was found.
Right.
Like he was just found floating kind of on the banks of the river.
Right.
Barway's feet were bound together with duct tape, and then there was duct tape around his torso. But there was no obvious, like, he hadn't been shot, he hadn't been stabbed, there was no obvious, like, manner of death at that point.
Right.
So, another thing that's really interesting in terms of Pierre Collins is so the morning of Barway's disappearance, he was in court for a child support case involving his children that he had with another woman.
Oh.
So he's basically being sought after for child support.
Right.
He's unemployed. He has been for some time, and
So how's
apparently
gonna
he
pay
was
child support?
keeping that a secret, like from his current wife, didn't know, and so he was really in a bind. One person's going after him for child support, which he's not employed, so at some point that could be a criminal case.
Right.
It's not. They do go after people at times for that.
Right.
And then on top of it, he's not working.
Right.
So, and this was the day of his disappearance, because The issue here is when you're talking about premeditation.
Right.
I think it's very evident that it was premeditated.
Oh,
Based on the life insurance, based on the fact that he was in court, based on and after he went to court in the morning, his phone pinged off that site in the Mississippi River that he later went to later in the day.
So it's like he went to court and he's like, how am I going to do this? What am I going to...
So he started scouting for a spot.
Right.
And he had already, 2 days prior, he upped his policy on Barway in particular.
Oh, yeah.
And
this is an obvious premeditation.
Yeah. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because some of the articles are, well, we'll never really know for sure because, spoiler alert, he does confess, but his story is not consistent with premeditation, unfortunately. But to me, it's so obvious that it was.
I mean, how could you... I mean, you can't really... if it weren't for those factors of having gone to court and calling the life insurance, yeah, maybe I could see, it was just the spur of the moment. I'm going to do this because I really need the money, just a sudden thing.
Well,
but these are the facts. This is what he did. He did these things. He did call the life insurance company. And how obvious could you be? Do you know what I mean?
I don't think he had a good knowledge base of what the police are able to find out. Right. I don't think they did say he likely tried to put his phone on airplane mode for like an hour.
Oh,
but
thinking that would help.
His phone was connecting with like Wi-Fi locally,
right?
So they were able to, you'd
have to like shut it off all the way.
And I'm not trying to give advice on how to get away with the crime.
No,
but just don't even bring your phone.
Right.
But that's the thing, though, is when you're looking.
Everybody does.
Well, most people do, and especially if it's not planned.
Right.
But circumstantial evidence is funny because not bringing your phone when you're not at home is also
suspicious.
That
it never left.
When they know you went somewhere.
Right.
So
that is also suspicious.
You could say, well, I forgot my phone. Well, right. How often do you forget your phone?
Right.
Like, pretty much never.
And you go back for it. I mean,
yeah. So
most people now are very attached to their phones.
Right. I mean,
it's directions, it's emergency assistance.
Well, I do a lot of gig work, so I can't even work if I don't have it.
Right.
I literally can't.
Your calendar's on your phone, your schedule, your just everything.
And this was only 7 years ago, so it wasn't. Right. I mean, all that stuff was pertinent 7 years ago.
Oh yeah.
So anyhow, Pierre Collins was arrested about 3 days after they found the body. So they found it on April 11th. So he was arrested around the 14th of April. He did try to deny it initially, but I think once the police kind of laid it out for him and he realized how much evidence they had, he did finally admit to it. He, of course, they wanted to avoid a trial, and they offered him a plea bargain.
Oh.
Now, one nice thing to note is the Liberian mother, some of the Liberian communities raised money for her to buy her a plane ticket and lodging and accommodation so she could come to the United States for his funeral and for the court proceedings.
That's great.
So she did come to Minnesota for that. So some of the proceedings were a bit delayed till she was able to get here. And she was devastated, even though, he lived in a different country, and she even said, if he was bothering you so bad, why would, she's like, you should have just sent him back.
Right.
I would have taken him back.
Right.
And,
but that wasn't it. He needed the money.
Well, right. But they ended up offering him a plea bargain of 40 years with a full confession.
Oh, that's pretty good.
I don't think it was 40 years with no parole. I think he has the possibility of parole, because to me, if they don't say without parole, then it usually implies that they can be paroled.
Right. It
So,
does in Minnesota. That's
And Minnesota,
generous.
honestly, has, for murder, I feel like we have really
Generous.
Yeah, our
sentences.
sentencing can be
is-
really weird.
It
And-
is. Like sometimes there'll be cases where you feel like it was like an accidental death. Okay, life, no parole. And then sometimes
Uh-huh.
it's a case where something like
Well, in this case, they said that part of the reason they gave him
Like this.
that kind of a deal is because he
Oh,
had no
God.
criminal history.
well, so if I have no criminal history, I don't have a criminal history. So what should that I don't understand why that factors in so much. I mean, with a murder.
With a murder,
With a
specifically,
murder.
yeah.
Specifically with a murder.
Yeah, if it's
Because-
something else, I understand, but not for a
Oh, it's not
murder.
my second murder, so I should be,
Right.
I should get a better deal. I mean, but okay.
I think the confession was really important, but unfortunately, so he took the deal
Well, yeah.
for the 40 years, and that's the thing too. So he's 33 at that time.
Right.
In 2015, he was 33, so he's about my age.
Yeah.
Or now he is, I should say.
Yeah.
But he would be 73 when he got out, but then if he gets paroled,
He'll get paroled after 20 years, so 25,
yeah,
20,
he
25
could be
years.
out in like 10 years.
Yeah.
At the age of
50 years.
50s.
Yeah.
And so he could still have, 20, 30
Time.
years of freedom.
Right.
So I personally think he could have easily been charged with first-degree murder, because here's the thing. His confession, this is what he says happened.
Right.
He says that when Barway got off the bus, or the van, whatever, he went out and was playing with his friends, and he was not allowed to do that. He said Barway had to immediately come into the apartment.
Why?
That's just what he said.
Okay.
And he said when Barway finally came in the apartment, he said he was mad that he was out playing without permission. I think he was kind of like, I'm sure he was abusive.
Right, in general.
And so to him, it was like, this is the rule, you broke the rule. He claims he was so angry that he just punched him and he knocked him out.
What kind of cheese?
Yeah.
Like, that's a whole lot better.
Exactly. And I'm not laughing because it's funny.
Well,
It's
no, it
just-
isn't, but it's the whole... Like, he thought that was... I mean, what kind of better story is that?
Well, apparently he thinks... I think he's trying to make it more like, I didn't plan any of it. It just was all, out of this, I was enraged.
Right, like,
And
okay,
so-
I get for his case of the premeditation and the first degree.
Right, but even
Murder.
so, the plea bargain, even if he admitted to premeditation,
Right.
the plea bargain was still going to be in place. They're not going to revoke the plea bargain
Right.
if he says suddenly that it was premeditated.
Right.
So, unfortunately, I don't think he told the truth.
No.
Because he says then he loaded him up in the car and brought him and threw him in the river while he was unconscious. So he wasn't even, according to him, he was not dead when he threw him in the river. He was
Oh.
just unconscious.
When he could have brought him to a hospital, he could have left him outside a hospital and walked away.
Well,
I mean,
he said
but that isn't what happened. We know he was.
And he said he was
dead.
scared that Barway would have, turned him in for hitting him.
Well,
And so it's like, so you think killing him is
This
a
is
better
better
option?
solution.
Like, would you rather get in trouble for child abuse, or would you rather get charged with a murder?
right.
It's
Right.
like,
I mean, that doesn't make sense.
I think maybe he counted on the fact that his body would never be discovered,
right.
which it's like he didn't weigh it down or anything, so I don't know why he thought it wouldn't be discovered.
He was not, again, a criminal. He was not a criminal
No.
mastermind.
I think he just really underestimated the police.
Right.
I think he just didn't realize.
Or maybe in his culture, policing is different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just out on a limb here. Maybe that's his idea of the police. That,
For sure.
That,
Mhm.
he could get away with this just from his past experiences. Did they ever find a cause of death?
No. They never actually did. So it was something that it was not blunt force trauma. I mean, even it could very well be that he knocked him unconscious and threw him in the river.
Ugh.
That very well could have been what happened.
But wasn't there blunt force trauma somewhere then if he knocked him
Well,
unconscious?
not necessarily if he punched him in the face.
I suppose, but the other thing is, I would. Wouldn't you think like asphyxiation somehow?
Yeah, and that can be hidden.
Right.
I think there's a misconception that the hyoid one always gets broken, but that's not true.
It's not true, no.
And in children, there's some variation in a child. I don't know exactly what that is, like in the medical sense, but in terms of like their development, I don't know.
Do they test them for poison or?
I mean, I think at that point, knowing that he killed him,
it didn't matter.
I don't know that it really mattered. But unfortunately, the plea bargain was supposed to be so he told the truth.
And he didn't.
And he really didn't, because the life insurance stuff is too big of a coincidence.
Right.
And
it is.
Like, really, you're gonna kill your kid for $30,000 essentially because
$30,000. That's unbelievably low.
That is like, I mean, honestly, that $30,000 in the
Why
like
would
if you
even
even back in 2015, that's just not that much money.
It isn't.
Especially with the cost of things these days.
I know
it
he
just
felt
isn't.
desperate, but geez, I mean,
get a job. I'm not trying to sound like one of and
let's get a job, people. But you know what I mean. But
or
do something.
I would imagine he maybe qualified for assistance,
right?
With all those kids in the house.
When you tell the court, I have no job, and then they do something with the reduce the child support or something, or I don't know how that works, but you would imagine that there would be.
And back in 2015, it might not have been as easy to get a job as it is now, because right now the job market, there's tons of available jobs.
That's true.
But
there might have been a justifiable reason why he wasn't working.
But either way, like, he's not the first person to be in that situation.
No.
He unfortunately,
these things happen to people in life. This is life. Mm-hmm. Anything can happen at any time. I mean, no, he isn't the first one, and so he would have been in arrears with child support. Okay, right. Then eventually you get a job and you make it up, or whatever happens. You know what I mean? Like,
so
life will move on.
He ended up. It was a second-degree murder charge.
Yeah, and we see this quite frequently, where in order to avoid court, they go after a lesser charge. And it's a terribly sad story.
I think,
especially in child murders.
And they said they determined he completely acted alone.
But who was this uncle?
That's the mystery of the day.
You still wonder who this uncle was. You wonder if there was...
Because he had to have done this, like, right when he got home from school.
And then,
pretty much.
Right.
So then you're thinking, if he was with somebody, how is that person completely not involved?
Right.
That doesn't...
Right. Somebody might have gotten away with...
And maybe it was a friend of his that they didn't know that he was friends with.
Right.
But then you'd think his cell phone would have indicated who it was.
Maybe. Yeah.
But, yeah, I thought that part was odd.
Or maybe he was, standing near somebody who he thought was, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Saw a car that he thought might have belonged to somebody they knew, and it wasn't, or who knows?
Yeah. Well, so now he is in jail at this very day, or in prison, I should say.
Well, he belongs there.
Yeah. So, that's the story of little Barway Collins.
Oh, so sad.
And of course the Liberian community was really upset because they felt like it reflected badly on them, and
it was just a bad person.
I know, and that's something, that's sad, because when a white person commits a crime, we don't say, well, that makes white people look bad. You don't really hear that.
No, and it's just because it's the minority culture, I think, in Minnesota. So, I mean, these things happen in all cultures. Either you're a bad person or you're not.
Well,
or you commit a bad crime, or you didn't. You know what I mean? Like,
I think father killing their own son is a pretty rare
yes,
crime.
it is. I think.
So,
I mean, it happens, but it's not. You don't hear about it a ton.
no. I mean, fortunately.
I have heard about it. I've heard of other cases. But,
Well, yeah, they exist,
but
for
not-
sure.
It's not the norm.
No. So yeah, I thought it was good. Actually, our cousin Kelly, Leo Kelly.
Yes.
We call him Kelly, but
His name's Leonard.
yes, he is the one that suggested this case.
Yes.
So-
Well, thank you. Thank you, Kel.
All right. Well,
That wraps it up. Another exciting episode of Bleak. Bleak.
are you a bleakazoid?
Or a bleak freak.
I always forget that there are two options. Maybe we could, if we get enough listeners, maybe we can get some merchandise or something.
That would be great.
Yes.
Yes.
We did have a listener in what was the country again? It was somewhere in the
I've never heard of, like Osmos or Assam.
Omen.
Omen. That was it.
Yeah.
Omen.
Yeah.
Omen.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, shout out to the listener in Omen.
Omen. Yes. And it's Oman or is it Omen?
I mean, in America we would probably pronounce it Omen.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna go with
You're
that.
gonna go with that. Now,
Yeah.
now I have to figure out where this country is.
Yeah.
You know, my research brain. Who the people of the country? Do we want to visit?
I don't know that
Kind
we
of a
want to
thing.
visit. No offense.
I don't know.
Just kidding. We love your country.
We love all the countries.
Yes.
Well, there's a couple right now that I'm not thrilled with, but it's not the people; it's the dictators. Anyway,
Alright. Well, we hope
that's a
you-
topic for a different show.
We hope you keep listening, and
Keep it real.
we don't know when our next episode will be. Probably after the holidays sometime.
Yeah.
But we're gonna hopefully be a little more consistent.
Yeah.
But I would rather have like a high quality episode where we actually have done our research than like just try to throw together something just for the sake of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'd rather do episodes when we're actually prepared.
I don't know. I'm more of a fly by the seat of your pants kind of person, and you're more of a preparer in that respect.
I just like to have good research. I don't
Yeah,
know.
I do too. I mean, so far, a lot of the cases that I have done, I've heard of or knew about already. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it will be fun to eventually find a case that I haven't heard of and that I have to actually do a lot of.
And
more
like
research.
Barway Collins, when Kelly first suggested it to me, I was like, oh, I've not heard of that one. But
Yeah.
immediately when I started looking it up, I was like, oh yeah, I totally remember this. And there was a lot of stuff that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So even though you might know like the gist of it,
Right.
I didn't know anything about, I didn't know about the insurance.
Why haven't they done any specials on that or any?
I don't know. Just some cases just don't get the attention.
That's true.
For whatever reason. I hate to say it, but it could be that he's a minority immigrant.
Well, I don't think that should have anything to do with it.
I don't either, but, that could be. So,
Well, and he's in jail, so who would there be? Oh, the police. They could interview the police.
yeah.
But there isn't in the country. There's not, another parent or somebody who could.
Literally, there are
It'd be
this
difficult.
case has not been covered by any podcast.
No, first time
Yeah.
right here on Bleak.
You heard it here first.
Yes.
All right. Good day. Good day, everybody.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.